I-29F recently inherited a house from my late uncle, and what should have been a blessing has turned into a complete family nightmare. My uncle was quite a character, an eccentric but brilliant man who made his fortune in software development before retiring early. He passed away at 60 a few months ago, leaving behind this stunning two-story house with a swimming pool and $75,000 to me, while his other assets were split among various family members. The house itself is like something out of a dream, Spanish colonial revival style with terracotta roof tiles and whitewashed walls, surrounded by mature oak trees. My uncle had renovated it extensively over the years, adding modern amenities while preserving its historic charm. The swimming pool, his pride and joy, has an intricate mosaic tile design that he commissioned from an artist he met during his travels in Barcelona. Every corner of this house tells a story about him, and I feel honored to be its new owner. As a nurse practitioner working in the ICU, I'm used to long shifts and irregular hours. The transition to living here hasn't been easy, especially with my schedule. I work 12-hour night shifts 3 to 4 times a week, and the hospital where I work is a level 1 trauma center, which means we get the most critical cases. Between the demanding work schedule and trying to settle into a new home, I hadn't fully finished unpacking 2 weeks after moving in. My parents divorced when I was 4, but they managed to maintain an admirably amicable relationship while raising me. Unlike many divorce stories you hear, there was no drama, no fighting over custody. They simply realized they were incompatible but remained good friends. This arrangement worked perfectly throughout my childhood and well into my adult years. That is, until about 2 years ago when my mother Catherine, 53F, remarried. I invited my parents to see my new place the day after I moved in, expecting just them to come. However, my mother brought along her stepdaughter Madison, 16F, which caught me off guard. It's not that I minded her presence, I've always tried to be welcoming to Madison since my mother's remarriage. But despite my efforts to build a relationship with her, Madison has consistently maintained this cold, almost dismissive attitude toward me. She's the type of teenager who acts like everyone around her is beneath her notice, especially old people like me who are practically ancient, her words, not mine. Since my mother's remarriage to Michael, 51M, I've noticed a dramatic shift in our relationship. During their 2-year dating period, everything seemed fine. Michael was pleasant enough during our occasional family dinners, and I genuinely tried to connect with Madison during those times. But after the wedding, it was like a switch flipped. My mother became increasingly absorbed in her new family life, our weekly coffee dates became monthly, then quarterly, and now they're practically non-existent. I've watched my mother transform from someone who would call me multiple times a day to check on me to someone who barely remembers my birthday. She missed my department's recognition ceremony at the hospital last year, the first time in my career she wasn't there to support me. When I confronted her about it, she explained that Madison had a dance recital the same day. I understood, of course, but it still hurt. My father Daniel, 55M, remained single and became my primary emotional support. He's the one who helped me move into the new house, who brings me dinner during particularly rough shifts at the hospital, and who still maintains our Sunday brunch tradition. He's also the one who noticed how much my mother's distance was affecting me, though I tried to hide it. The neighborhood where my uncle's house is located is quite upscale, mostly populated by successful professionals in their 50s and 60s. Since moving in, I've gotten more than a few disapproving looks from my neighbors. One of them, a particularly nosy woman, actually had the audacity to ask if I was renting or if my parents had bought the house for me. When I explained that I'd inherited it from my uncle, she gave me this condescending smile and said, "How fortunate for someone your age." Last week, I was asked to attend an important meeting by my hospital administration. They needed someone to present our department's new trauma response protocol to a partner hospital, and my supervisor specifically requested me. The location was a 7-hour drive from the city, and I was hesitant to accept because of an important package scheduled to arrive, a rare collector's edition game I'd been waiting months to get. It was meant to be an anniversary gift for my boyfriend James, 31M, and after spending considerable time tracking it down, I couldn't risk missing the delivery. I tried every possible option to have someone receive the package. My dad was out of town on a fishing trip with his friends. I obviously couldn't ask James since it was his surprise gift, and none of my friends' schedules aligned with the delivery time. I was seriously considering asking my judgmental neighbors when, surprisingly, my mother called. These days, my mother calling is about as rare as a solar eclipse, and usually means she needs something. True to form, she asked if she could use my house for her book club meeting that weekend. She explained that Michael would be working from home during their usual meeting time, and since my house wasn't far from her neighborhood, it would be perfect. Coincidentally, this was the same day as both my business trip and the package delivery, so I immediately agreed. Looking back, there were red flags I should have noticed. For one, my mother seemed unusually interested in confirming exactly when I'd be leaving and how long I'd be gone. She also asked detailed questions about my home security system, which I'd mentioned installing during our last conversation months ago. But at the time, I was just relieved to have someone handle the package situation. My mother had been part of this book club for over a decade, so it seemed perfectly legitimate. I handed over my keys around 1 p.m. and started my journey. The drive was actually quite pleasant. I had my favorite podcasts queued up and was looking forward to using the hotel's spa facilities after the meeting. Around the 5th hour of my drive, however, I received a call from my boss informing me that the client had suffered a severe allergic reaction and was hospitalized, meeting cancelled. Frustrated but hungry, I stopped at a restaurant to figure out my next steps. While eating, I decided to check my newly installed CCTV cameras, mainly to see how well they were working. What I saw made me nearly choke on my food. Instead of a few middle-aged women discussing literature in my living room, my house was overrun with teenagers. Not just a few, I'm talking at least 100 kids packed into every room. They were everywhere, in the pool, on my furniture, even in my bedroom. I immediately started the drive back home, my stomach churning with each mile. By the time I arrived around 11 p.m., the music was audible from a block away. Kids were drinking beer and lounging in my front yard, some jumping into the pool my uncle had so lovingly designed. The inside of my house was even worse. The air reeked of cheap beer and sweat, and I had to push through crowds of teenagers who were either dancing, making out, or vaping. The beautiful hardwood floors my uncle had installed were sticky with spilled drinks, and someone had already managed to stain my cream-colored sofa. Empty beer cans and red cups littered every surface, and I'm pretty sure I saw someone trying to do a keg stand in my kitchen. My uncle's beloved book collection, which he'd left me and I'd carefully arranged in the library, had been carelessly shoved aside to make room for a makeshift DJ booth. I finally found Madison in my master bedroom upstairs, lounging on my bed with her feet propped up on my pillows, drinking beer with about 10 of her friends. When she saw me standing in the doorway, she just rolled her eyes and went back to her conversation. That's when I lost it. I grabbed her arm, pulled her to her feet, and told her she and her friends needed to clear out immediately or I'd call the cops. She had the audacity to argue, claiming my mother said she could use the place for the day. Thankfully, some of her friends seemed scared by the mention of police. They were all clearly underage and drinking. Within half an hour, they'd cleared out, leaving behind a disaster zone that used to be my home. I immediately called my mother and gave her an earful about taking advantage of my trust. Instead of apologizing, she started arguing that I'd overreacted and ruined Madison's birthday party. Apparently, they'd wanted to throw a party but their house wasn't big enough, so my mother thought I should be selfless and let the little sister use my place. She accused me of being selfish, saying I had this massive house now and could afford to let people use it. When I pointed out the underage drinking and the potential legal consequences, she dismissed my concerns entirely. She had deliberately lied to me and let her stepdaughter throw a party to impress her friends with a house that wasn't hers, and she saw absolutely nothing wrong with that. My mother then claimed that even if she had asked directly, I would have said no because I never liked Madison. This is completely untrue. Madison was the one who always acted cold toward me despite my attempts to be friendly. I tried everything from taking an interest in her hobbies to buying her thoughtful birthday gifts, but nothing seemed to break through her wall of teenage disdain. The argument continued until I demanded she pay for or arrange cleanup, as my house was completely trashed. The beautiful mosaic pool tiles were scratched from people jumping in with shoes on, someone had broken an antique lamp that had been in my uncle's family for generations, and I didn't even want to think about the state of my bathrooms. She refused, saying that since I was selfish enough to kick Madison out and embarrass her in front of her schoolmates, I could clean up myself. Then she hung up and blocked me everywhere: phone, social media, even email. In the heat of the moment, I called her husband Michael and explained everything, demanding they pay for the damages their daughter had caused. To his credit, he was reasonable about it. He immediately sent money and apologized, saying he would speak to them and make them apologize too. I told him that wasn't necessary, but he had already disconnected the call. The next morning, I received an angry call from my mother. Apparently, Michael had confronted both of them about what they'd done. He had grounded Madison and insisted they both apologize to me. Instead of apologizing, my mother called to yell at me for involving her husband in something he had no business knowing about. She then told me that Madison was right. I really was an arrogant and narcissistic b*tch. She said I'd only inherited the house because my uncle felt sorry for me, and that I didn't deserve such a beautiful home if I wasn't willing to share it. The words stung more than I cared to admit, especially coming from someone who used to be my biggest supporter. It's been 2 days, and I'm still struggling to process everything. While we haven't been as close these past couple years, it hurts deeply that she would say such horrible things just to hurt me. I honestly don't understand where I went wrong. I feel I was completely reasonable throughout this entire situation. I wouldn't have even called her husband if she hadn't blocked me first. The house that was supposed to be a blessing, a beautiful reminder of my uncle's love and generosity, now feels tainted by this whole ordeal. Every time I walk past the scratched pool tiles or look at the empty spot where the antique lamp used to stand, I'm reminded of how my own mother chose her stepdaughter's social status over my trust and property. Was I wrong to call my mother's husband to complain about her and her stepdaughter's behavior after she trashed my house during a party? Update 1. It's been a week since the party incident, and I wanted to thank everyone for their overwhelming support and advice. After taking time to process everything, I've made some difficult but necessary decisions about my relationship with my mother. First, let me address the damage situation. Michael's payment covered most of the repairs, including professional cleaning services and restoration work for the pool tiles. The antique lamp, unfortunately, is irreplaceable, but a local artisan has offered to create a similar piece that captures the essence of the original. During this week, I've been speaking with my grief counselor from when my uncle passed away. She helped me realize something important. This situation isn't just about a ruined party or damaged property. It's about years of subtle rejection and replacement that I've been trying to ignore. She pointed out how I've been making excuses for my mother's behavior, just like I did when she missed my awards ceremony at the hospital. My father has been incredibly supportive through all of this. He's been helping me upgrade the security system. We've added biometric locks and motion sensors. While installing them, he shared some insights about my mother that I'd never considered. Apparently, after their divorce, she struggled with not being the perfect mother she'd imagined she'd be. When Madison came along, she saw it as a second chance. The most surprising support came from my neighbors. Remember the judgmental ones I mentioned? Well, they've completely changed their tune. Mrs. Peterson, the one who questioned whether I could afford to live here, brought over a homemade lasagna and apologized for her previous behavior. She said she heard the party from her house but didn't call the police because she recognized some of the cars as belonging to my mother's neighbors. She felt guilty for not intervening and has been rallying the neighborhood association to help me feel more welcome. My colleagues at the hospital have been amazing too. When I explained why I needed to switch some shifts to deal with the aftermath, they not only covered for me but also organized a home blessing dinner. They helped me rearrange the furniture and sage the house, turning it back into a space that feels like mine again. I've decided to go no contact with my mother. This wasn't an easy decision, but after discussing it with my counselor, I realized it's necessary for my mental health. I've drafted an email explaining my decision but haven't sent it yet. The draft sits in my folder, a testament to how difficult this is despite being the right choice. Madison sent me a text yesterday, the first direct communication we've ever had. It wasn't an apology. Instead, she complained that being grounded was ruining her social life and blamed me for overreacting. I didn't respond. My counselor suggests that Madison's behavior might stem from her own insecurities about her place in my mother's life, but honestly, I'm too exhausted to analyze her motivations anymore. James has been my rock through all of this. He's been staying over more often, helping me restore my uncle's book collection to its proper place and listening to me process my feelings. Yesterday, we found my uncle's old journal while reorganizing the library. Reading it gave me an unexpected sense of peace. He wrote about choosing me as his heir because he saw something of himself in me, a quiet determination to forge our own paths despite family pressures. The house is starting to feel like home again, albeit differently. I've been redecorating, not to erase my uncle's touches, but to blend them with my own style. The space where the antique lamp stood now holds a beautiful bonsai tree, a symbol of new growth and resilience. The scratches on the pool tiles remind me less of betrayal now and more of the importance of boundaries. I've started hosting small dinner parties for my hospital colleagues, reclaiming the space with new, positive memories. Last night, during one of these gatherings, my trauma unit director shared something that resonated deeply. Family isn't just about blood or marriage, it's about who shows up when you need them most. As for Christmas, which I'd originally planned to host here, I'm now organizing a chosen family celebration instead. My father, James, and my closest friends will be there. The house will be filled with love and laughter, just as my uncle would have wanted. To those wondering about legal action, I've consulted with a lawyer friend who advised documenting everything but suggested waiting to see if Michael's intervention prevents any future incidents before pursuing legal options. I have security footage of the party saved, just in case. I'm learning that sometimes the hardest part of growing up isn't about gaining things, it's about accepting losses and recognizing when relationships have become toxic, even with people we love deeply. My mother may have chosen her do-over family, but that's her loss. I'm choosing to focus on the people who choose me back. The house my uncle left me isn't just a building, it's a foundation for the life I'm choosing to build, surrounded by people who respect and value me. Sometimes the family we create is more meaningful than the one we're born into. So no, I don't regret calling Michael. Sometimes doing the right thing feels wrong, but that doesn't make it any less right. Update 2. Some revelations from my father have helped me understand my mother's behavior in a completely new light. After reading all your comments suggesting I dig deeper into my mother's past, I decided to have a heart-to-heart conversation with my dad over dinner at his place. What he told me was eye-opening. Apparently, my mother's transformation isn't just about Madison, it's about reliving her own glory days. My dad and mom went to the same high school, though they didn't start dating until years later. He described her as the quintessential it girl of their school, head cheerleader, homecoming queen, student body president, the whole package. The yearbook photos were fascinating, my mother in her cheerleading uniform, surrounded by adoring friends, looking exactly like Madison does now. The same confident smile, the same perfectly styled hair, even the same way of tilting her head in photos. It was like looking at twins separated by time. According to my father, watching Madison navigate high school has been like a second chance for my mother to relive her golden years. Madison is apparently ruling her school the same way my mother did, popular, athletic, socially dominant. The difference, my dad pointed out, is that you were always more like me, intellectual, focused on achievement rather than social status. My father then revealed something that hit hard. During their divorce proceedings, my mother had actually said she felt like a failure because she couldn't shape me into the daughter she'd envisioned. She loved me, but she didn't understand me. My father fought for joint custody specifically because he worried she might try too hard to change who I fundamentally was. This context explains so much about my mother's current behavior. Madison isn't just a stepdaughter, she's the do-over daughter my mother always wanted. She's living the same high school experience my mother treasured, making the same choices, even dating the captain of the football team just like my mother did. The hospital where I work recently had a fundraising gala, and I invited both my parents. My father came, dressed in his best suit, proud to watch me receive recognition for a new trauma care protocol I'd developed. My mother declined, saying she had to help Madison prepare for her cheerleading competition. The parallel was almost too perfect, the academic daughter versus the social butterfly, and my mother's choice was clear. Some of my mother's friends from her book club, the real one, not the fake excuse she used, have reached out to me. They've distanced themselves from her since learning about what happened. One of them, her former best friend, told me that my mother has been increasingly fixated on reliving her youth through Madison, even trying to recreate her own high school experiences down to the smallest details. The most revealing thing was finding my mother's old diary in a box of memories my father had kept. With his permission, I read some entries from around the time I was in high school. They were filled with a strange mixture of love for me and disappointment that I wasn't following in her footsteps. One entry particularly stood out. Sometimes I look at her buried in her textbooks and wonder where I went wrong. She's so much like her father, so serious, so focused on things that never mattered in real life. Will she ever understand that being liked is more important than being smart? This discovery has actually helped me find peace with our current situation. My mother's behavior isn't really about me, it's about her own unresolved issues and unfulfilled desires. Madison isn't just a stepdaughter she's choosing over me, she's the vessel for my mother's second chance at the life she thinks she lost. Understanding this doesn't make her actions okay, but it does make them make sense. The party incident wasn't just about letting Madison use my house, it was about my mother trying to give her mini-me the kind of epic party she remembers from her own high school days. Consequences be damned. My father ended our conversation with some wisdom that stuck with me. Your mother never learned that you can't relive your past through someone else. She's so busy trying to recreate her glory days through Madison that she's missing out on the amazing woman you've become. As a healthcare professional, I deal with family dynamics all the time, but it's different when it's your own family under the microscope. My mother is trapped in her past, trying to perfect it through Madison, while I've built a future she never imagined for herself. Maybe that's why she can't relate to my life or my achievements, they simply don't fit into the script she's trying to follow. I'm starting to understand that going no contact isn't just about protecting myself from her actions, it's about accepting that we're on fundamentally different paths. She's chosen to live in her past through Madison, and I'm choosing to build my future on my own terms. Update 3, big news everyone, I got engaged. After everything that's happened, I wanted to share this happy development with the community that's supported me through this difficult time. James and I had planned to celebrate our 3rd anniversary quietly at home. I gave him that collector's edition game, yes, the one that started this whole mess, and he absolutely loved it. But he had a surprise of his own planned. He transformed our backyard into an enchanted garden, with twinkling lights strung through the oak trees. He proposed right next to the restored pool. The engagement party was beautiful and intimate. James's family was incredibly welcoming. His mother gave me her grandmother's pearl necklace, a gesture that moved me to tears, especially given recent events. Despite everything, I decided to extend an olive branch and invited my mother through Michael, since she's still blocking me everywhere. Her response. She sent back a message saying that I'm no daughter of hers, and that she hopes I'm happy with my cold, loveless life of achievement. She added that Madison's upcoming Sweet 16 party will be 10 times better than my apathetic little engagement celebration. Ironically, our party was featured in the local newspaper's society page. James's mother is on their board. Madison saw the article and posted passive-aggressive TikToks about fake people who think they're better than everyone else. My father gave a beautiful toast, talking about watching me grow from a curious little girl who always asked why into a strong woman who never compromised who she was. He thanked James for being the kind of partner who celebrates my achievements rather than seeing them as threats. The hospital staff organized a surprise celebration during our night shift break, decorating the break room with surgical gloves turned into balloons and making a cake that looked like a miniature ICU unit. It was quirky and perfect, just like my work family. James and I are slowly turning the house into our own space while honoring my uncle's memory. We've converted one of the spare rooms into a gaming room, where that collector's edition now sits proudly displayed. The library remains largely unchanged, though we've added some medical textbooks alongside my uncle's tech manuals. The hardest part has been accepting that my mother won't be part of the wedding planning, no mother-daughter dress shopping, no family recipe sharing, none of the traditional moments I'd imagined. James's mother has offered to step in for these traditions, and while I'm grateful, it's a bittersweet replacement. Looking ahead, we're planning our own traditions. The house that was meant to be a source of family gatherings will still be exactly that, just not with the family I expected. We're planning to host regular Sunday brunches, holiday celebrations, and maybe someday, our own children will fill these rooms with laughter. My uncle's journal keeps reminding me that sometimes the best path isn't the expected one. Here I am, engaged to a man who loves me for exactly who I am, surrounded by people who celebrate rather than criticize my achievements. It's not the family story I grew up expecting, but it's becoming a better one than I could have imagined. Thank you, Reddit, for all your support and advice throughout this journey. Your kindness has meant more to me than you could ever know. Sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the one we're born into.